In the waning light of an autumn evening in 1887, I gazed out from the grand windows of Ashwood Hall, my heart heavy with a love that, to the world, might seem more a burden than a blessing. My son Edmund was my life's work, my heart's deepest joy, and yet shadows of a night long ago lingered in my soul, unspoken but ever present. From the moment he was born, Edmund was mine to protect, to guide, to love, with an intensity that some might call smothering. But what is a mother's love if not all-consuming? I had lost my dear husband to the cold embrace of the earth, and in the vast emptiness he left behind, Edmund became my anchor, my purpose. Yet beneath my love lay a dark secret, a night of panic and despair that I buried deep within the recesses of my mind. My days were spent ensuring his happiness, his education, his future. But there were moments when my eyes met his, and I saw not just the reflection of my love, but the echo of my fear. I chose his friends, his engagements, his very destiny, perhaps too tightly, hoping to keep him close, safe from the darkness I knew all too well. Then came Miss Clara Montrose, a breath of fresh air, or so I thought at first. Her laughter, so free, so unencumbered by the weight of nobility, filled our halls with a light I had not seen in years. But as I watched her with Edmund, my heart clenched. Her influence was not one of elevation but of disruption. I saw the way Edmund's eyes followed her, the way his laughter mingled with hers, and I knew she was unraveling the threads of our life together, stirring up memories I had locked away. I tried, oh how I tried, to steer him back to me. I arranged meetings with suitable young ladies, hoping to remind him of his place, his duties. But Edmund, my Edmund, was becoming a stranger, his heart no longer mine to command. Each step he took away from me felt like a reopening of old wounds, of nights that should have remained silent. The night of the grand ball was my last stand, a battleground disguised in elegance. I had planned to announce his engagement to Lady Penelope, a match that would bind our family's futures securely. But as the music swelled, I watched in horror as Edmund took to the floor, not with Penelope, but with Clara. Their dance was a silent scream of defiance, a public declaration of love that made my carefully constructed world tremble. My anger was that of a wounded beast, fueled by fears and guilt I could never voice. I confronted them, my words laced with the venom of a mother scorned, but in their eyes I saw not the fear or regret I anticipated, but love, a love so pure and defiant it shone like a beacon in the darkest night. The aftermath was a tempest, a storm of emotions I could hardly bear. Edmund stood before me, not as the boy I had raised, but as a man claiming his right to choose, to love. His words were like daggers, each one severing the ties I had so meticulously woven. As they left Ashwood Hall hand in hand, my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I watched from the balcony, tears streaming down my cheeks, realizing how my love had become a cage rather than a sanctuary. But there was more than just loss. There was a deep, unspoken guilt that gnawed at my conscience, a reminder of a night when I lost myself to despair, a night whose consequences lingered like a spectre over our lives. In the silence that followed, I was left with my thoughts, my fears, and the echo of their laughter, which now seemed like a lament for what could have been. I was the devouring mother, I see that now, whose love was so fierce it nearly consumed all in its path. But love, true love, I learned that night, is not about possession. It is about setting free, about watching them soar, even if it means they fly away from you. And so, in my solitude, I pondered this lesson, hoping, perhaps against all hope, that one day Edmund might return, not out of obligation, but out of love, freely given, all the while haunted by the silent screams of a night that had forever altered the course of our lives.
In the quietude of Ashwood Hall, where the air was thick with history and the scent of aged wood and ancient roses, I felt like an intruder at first. I was Clara Montrose, a simple woman by the standards of this grand estate, brought in to be a companion to the formidable Lady Evangeline. but my heart danced to its own tune, one that would eventually play the melody of love in this somber place. From the moment I laid eyes on Edmund, there was a spark, an electricity that I hadn't known in my modest life. He was the very portrait of a Victorian gentleman, yet there was something in his eyes, a yearning for something beyond the gilded cage of his mother's control. I saw in him a kindred spirit, someone who, like me, felt the pull of freedom in a world of rigid expectations. My days in Ashwood Hall were filled with the subtle dance of gaining Lady Evangeline's trust, while stealing moments with Edmund. Each encounter was a treasure, hidden from the watchful eyes of his mother. We spoke of dreams under the guise of walks in the garden or hushed conversations in the library. His laughter, so rare, was like sunlight breaking through the clouds, and I found myself falling, deeply and irrevocably, into love with him. But with love came the shadow of Lady Evangeline's disapproval. Her love for Edmund was not the gentle kind that nurtures. It was possessive, a love that sought to keep him tethered to her side. I felt the weight of her gaze, a silent warning in every interaction, a reminder that I was to remain in my place, a mere companion, not a contender for her son's heart. The tension was palpable, like the air before a storm. I saw the struggle in Edmund, the battle between his love for me and the duty to his mother. There were moments when I feared our love would be crushed under the weight of her expectations, but Edmund's resolve was my beacon of hope. The night of the grand ball was our stand, our declaration. Dancing with him, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, I knew we were defying more than just social norms. We were defying fate itself. The look in Lady Evangeline's eyes was one of betrayal, a storm brewing in her soul. But in that moment, surrounded by the opulence and the scrutiny of high society, I felt an invincibility, the strength of our love overshadowing all else. In the aftermath, there was chaos, words sharp as knives exchanged between mother and son. I stood by, my heart in my throat, watching the man I loved assert his independence. It was then I realized the depth of the struggle he had been living, the silent battles he fought under the guise of filial piety. When we left Ashwood Hall, it was with a bittersweet taste of victory. Leaving behind the opulence, the control, and yes, the pain of parting from a family, even one that had become so complicated. Edmund's hand in mine was not just a promise of love, but of a new beginning, one where we could write our own story, free from the shadows of the past. Yet as we walked into the twilight, I couldn't shake the feeling of sorrow for Lady Evangeline. There was love in her, a fierce, flawed kind, and I hoped one day she would find peace with her son's choice. For now, I focused on the life ahead, the life with Edmund, where love was not about possession, but about the courage to let go and the joy of being truly seen and loved.
In the shadow of Ashwood Hall, where each stone whispered of duty and legacy, I lived a life that was not entirely my own. I am Edmund Ashwood, the heir to this estate, bound by the chains of my mother's love, a love that felt more like a cage with each passing day. From the moment I was old enough to understand, I knew my life was mapped out before me, every friendship, every interest, all curated by Lady Evangeline. She was a force, a tempest of affection and control, her love for me a double-edged sword. I was her world, but that world was shrinking, suffocating me with its expectations. Then came Clara Montrose, like a breath of fresh air through the musty halls of my existence. Her laughter was the first genuine sound I heard in years, her eyes a window to a life I dared not dream of. She was warmth and light, the embodiment of freedom, and with every stolen glance and shared whisper, I found myself yearning for something more than the life laid out for me. Our meetings were clandestine, hidden under the guise of chance encounters in the garden or hushed conversations in the library. With Clara, I felt alive, my own person, not just an extension of my mother's will. But with this newfound love came the tension, the silent war between my heart and my duty. My mother's displeasure was palpable, her control tightening like a vice. The grand ball was supposed to be my mother's triumph, the night she would secure my future with an engagement that served her vision. Yet, as I danced with Clara under the chandeliers, I knew I was choosing my path. Her hand in mine was not just a dance, but a declaration of independence. The look on my mother's face was one of betrayal, a storm of emotions I had never seen before. The confrontation that followed was like watching something inevitable unfold. I stood my ground, my voice echoing through the halls, asserting my right to love, to live. It was both terrifying and liberating. Clara stood beside me, her presence giving me the strength I needed to break free from the chains that bound me to this place. Leaving Ashwood Hall with Clara was the hardest and most liberating thing I've ever done. The night air was crisp with the promise of a new beginning as we walked away, hand in hand. I felt the weight of my mother's gaze on my back, a mix of sorrow and anger, but I knew I was doing what was right for me, for us. In that moment, I realized the true nature of love. It wasn't about possession or control, but about mutual respect, about letting go. I carried with me the guilt of leaving my mother, yet also the hope that one day she would understand that my love for her was not diminished by my need to find my own way. Clara and I stepped into the darkness of the unknown, but it was a darkness filled with stars, each one a possibility, a future we would shape together. Ashwood Hall, with all its grandeur, was behind us now, and ahead was a life where love was not a chain but a bond, a journey we would take together, free from the shadows of the past.
In the silence, the water hums, whispers of shadows where sorrow drums. A voice from below calls my name, through rippling tides, through fire's flame. Oh, the deep calls to me, a song of despair, through the water's veil, through the heavy air. Rise through the fire, break through the cold. The echoes of the deep are stories retold. Guitar rises like waves from the shore. Drums pound as shadows roar. Steam rises where fire meets tide. The past and present forever collide. Not what was lost, but what I create. Through the deep's echoes, I find my fate.